When Sterling and Vale faces financial ruin, CEO Thomas Sterling takes a gamble on Vanessa Cole, a 40-year-old black finance expert with a sharp mind and zero patience for corporate ego. Surrounded by resistance and doubt, Vanessa fights to rescue the company from collapse, battling sabotage, subtle racism, and the pressure of being the only one like her in the room. But she doesn't just steady the ship, she takes the wheel. Share your thoughts about the story in the comments. If you liked the video and subscribe to the channel, let's move on to our story. Enjoy watching. Sterling and Vale sat like a crown jewel in Manhattan's skyline, mirrored glass, 30 stories high, its name etched in silver above revolving doors that spun endlessly. From the outside, the company looked like success incarnate. Interns in pencil skirts and pressed suits moved like clockwork. The espresso machines never stopped. Neither did the tension. Inside, however, the numbers told a different story. At 9:03 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, Thomas Sterling stood in the executive suite overlooking the city, coffee in one hand, silence in the other. The boardroom table behind him was still littered with folders from last night's emergency meeting. A pie chart on the screen flashed in warning red. Revenue lines dipped. Liquidity was bleeding. Two key investors had pulled out in the past week. Sterling and Vale was hemorrhaging money, and nobody on his team could stop it. Thomas, 45, wore a perfectly tailored navy suit that couldn't quite hide the exhaustion in his shoulders. He ran a hand through his dark blonde hair, once immaculate, now beginning to fray like the firm's brand image. The media hadn't caught on yet, but it was only a matter of time. And when they did, it would be a feeding frenzy. He turned from the window, jaw set. I need a solution. Not sympathy. His voice echoed into the hallway outside. 50 blocks uptown, Vanessa Cole was stepping out of a taxi, calm as ever. Black power heels. Soft gray wool coat cinched at the waist. Gold hoop earrings just subtle enough to be boardroom approved. Her natural curls framed a face that carried both grace and grit. She walked into an independent consulting firm on West 72nd, the kind of place where old clients still sent thank you fruit baskets months after contracts closed. Vanessa had just wrapped her third corporate rescue in 6 years. She turned around a mid-sized logistics company, helped it escape a Chapter 11 filing, and sold it to a bigger fish for twice its valuation. Textbook execution. Minimal casualties. But even then, after 20 years in finance, half of them cleaning up other people's disasters, there was always something missing. Respect. Longevity. A seat at the table without needing to justify why she deserved it. Her assistant, Rachel, waved from behind the front desk. Client list looks light this month. Vanessa smiled politely. That's how you know something big's coming. She wasn't wrong. Back at Sterling and Vale, Thomas was in his office, sleeves rolled up, scrolling through financial projections he couldn't stomach. Numbers lied when you let them. He needed someone who could make them scream the truth. He buzzed his assistant. Bring me every resume from that finance shortlist. I don't care if it's unconventional. Just give me someone who doesn't sound like a TED Talk. Moments later, a thick file landed on his desk. 5 candidates. 4 of them straight from Ivy League towers, all under 35. The last one, Vanessa Cole, was different. More experience. Less fanfare. Black. Older. Dressed in results, not buzzwords. Thomas tapped her resume twice, eyes narrowing. Let's see what you've got. That night, Vanessa sat at home in her modest Harlem apartment, sipping a glass of Malbec, CNN humming in the background. Her apartment was quiet, clean, filled with books and files and art that reminded her of home. A news anchor's voice drifted in. Sterling and Vale's stock dropped another 6% today amid growing concerns over leadership turmoil and aggressive spending in overseas markets. Vanessa didn't flinch. She just reached for her laptop and began updating her availability calendar. The next morning, Sterling and Vale's executive floor was unusually still. Word had spread. Layoffs might be coming. Bonuses were likely gone. And nobody trusted the numbers anymore, not even the ones in finance. Thomas walked through the corridor like a man heading toward a storm, not away from it. As he passed the glassed-in offices, he could feel eyes watching him, judging, waiting for him to fail, or to fix it. He stopped by the window again, the same one he'd stood at 24 hours earlier. New York buzzed beneath him, relentless, uncaring. He whispered to no one, I don't need a star. I need a fighter. That same morning, an email was sent from the Sterling and Vale HR department. Subject: Interview invitation, finance manager position. Dear Ms. Cole, we'd like to invite you to the Sterling and Vale headquarters this Friday at 10:30 a.m. for an interview regarding the finance manager role. Please bring a copy of your updated resume and be prepared to discuss previous turnaround strategies. Vanessa read it once, then twice. She leaned back in her chair, the ghost of a smile forming. Showtime. Later that evening, Thomas Sterling stood in a quiet elevator, descending to the ground floor. His phone buzzed. Incoming text: Dad. You need help, son. Not a miracle. Thomas sighed. His father had co-founded the firm in 1984 and sold his stake when Thomas took over. He never trusted his son's vision. Thanks for the faith, Thomas muttered under his breath. The doors opened. Thomas stepped into the night air, his jaw tight, mind racing. Across the city, Vanessa stood at her window watching the same skyline, unaware that her life, and his, were about to collide. The storm didn't come all at once. It arrived in quiet emails, dropped calls, and red flag memos buried in Friday folders. Sterling and Vale had once handled portfolios worth $500 million. Thomas Sterling had been on the cover of Forbes at 39. But all of that looked like a distant memory now. The downturn had started with a tech acquisition in Miami, an app no one used built on hype and vanity metrics. Then came the Eastern Europe expansion, a disastrous overreach that burned capital faster than they could raise it. And now, a whisper campaign among investors painted the firm as unstable, mismanaged, dying. On a bleak Thursday morning, Thomas's CFO walked into his office and slid a letter across the table without a word. Resignation. Thomas read it, nodded, said nothing. He waited until the door clicked shut before slamming his fist into the desk. Across the city, Vanessa Cole leaned over a stovetop in her apartment, stirring lentils while her 12-year-old niece, Maya, scribbled homework at the kitchen table. Vanessa had taken Maya in 2 years earlier, after her younger sister passed unexpectedly. The girl was bright, sharp-eyed, and asked questions like, "Why don't more people like us work in those big glass buildings?" Vanessa always gave her the same answer. Because they don't expect us to. But that's not your problem. Her apartment was warm, filled with earth tones, old jazz records, and the faint scent of vanilla. It wasn't luxurious, but it was home. She served Maya a plate and sat across from her with her own. "Anything happen at school today?" Vanessa asked. Maya shrugged. "I got picked to lead the math team. Some kid said I only got it 'cause I'm black." Vanessa didn't flinch. "And what did you say?" "I said, maybe. But I'll still beat you." Vanessa chuckled and reached across to bump fists. "That's my girl." Back at Sterling and Vale, the executive wing looked like a war room. Half the leadership team was in damage control mode. The other half was updating their resumes under the desk. Thomas stood in front of a floor-to-ceiling screen, clicking through slides his analysts had assembled overnight. Projected earnings missed by 23%. Retention rates plummeted. Investors were starting to circle like vultures. "Layoffs will buy us 4 months max," someone muttered. 4 months. Thomas shot back. "We need a resurrection." The room went quiet. Afterward, he called a private meeting with HR. "I want a finance manager. Someone with actual battlefield experience," he said. "No more Ivy League theory peddlers. Someone who's seen blood on the books and brought companies back." HR nodded, visibly sweating. "We'll push a call for immediate candidates." Thomas added, "And don't give me what you think I want. Give me what we need." Vanessa worked late that night, reviewing client accounts, checking quarterly projections for a boutique firm she was consulting. Her contract was due to expire in 6 weeks. Normally, she'd have already lined up the next job. But something in her gut said, wait. She stared at the emails on her screen. 3 offers, none of them worth her time. Smaller companies, same cycle. They wanted her to clean up without giving her the power to lead. She clicked decline on all of them. Across the room, Maya emerged in her pajamas. "Aunt V, you still working?" Vanessa smiled. "For a little while longer." Maya hesitated. "I had a dream last night." "Oh yeah. You were in this big room like a castle with 100 people and they all had clipboards. But you were the only one who had a sword." Vanessa raised an eyebrow. "A sword?" "Yeah. You looked awesome." Vanessa laughed, pulled the girl into a hug. Remind me to keep you around. I need the PR. Friday morning at Sterling and Vale was chaos in designer suits. A senior portfolio manager leaked internal numbers to the press. Half a dozen clients called to demand clarity. One anchor on a finance news show openly asked whether Sterling had lost his edge. Thomas barely blinked. He was used to the spotlight, just not when it burned. He sat alone in his office, staring at an empty whiteboard. Then came a knock. HR dropped off candidate files, his assistant said. He opened the folder. For men. One woman. The last file stood out immediately. Vanessa Cole. 20 years in finance. Specializes in corporate recovery. Saved 5 companies from bankruptcy. MBA from Howard. Former controller at 2 public firms. Thomas frowned, intrigued. Not flashy. No puffed-up credentials. Just results. Bring her in, he said. But you haven't read the rest. He handed the folder back. I've read enough. That evening, Vanessa was folding laundry with Maya when her phone buzzed. From hr@sterlingvale.com. Subject: Interview invitation, finance manager. We'd like to invite you. She read it slowly. Let it settle. Maya looked up from her book. Everything okay? Vanessa smiled, tired but steady. Looks like it's time for me to pick up a sword. The lobby of Sterling and Vale was a gleaming tribute to corporate wealth. Italian marble floors. Gold trim on the reception desk. A sculpture that didn't make sense unless you were rich enough to pretend it did. 5 candidates sat in a loose half-circle near the windows, each perfectly dressed, perfectly postured. All young. All white. All male. Vanessa Cole walked in at exactly 10:25 a.m., 5 minutes before her scheduled interview. She wore a black pantsuit, tailored, not trendy. Pearl studs. Minimal makeup. Hair in a neat twist. She moved like she belonged, even though everyone in the room instantly noticed she didn't look like she belonged. The receptionist gave her a polite but confused glance before checking the list. Name? Vanessa Cole. 10:30 appointment. The receptionist nodded and gestured toward the waiting area. Vanessa walked over and took a seat at the far end, legs crossed, hands folded, calm. The others didn't speak to her, but they noticed. How could they not? One of them, a cocky 20-something in a navy pinstripe suit, leaned over to another and whispered something behind his hand. They both laughed under their breath. Vanessa didn't flinch. She opened a leather-bound notebook and began reviewing her notes. She'd already done her homework. She knew Sterling and Vale's financial history, leadership shifts, and public statements better than some of its own employees. She knew how to fix a company before most of these boys had finished college. Across the lobby, a tall man in his 40s with an expensive haircut stepped out of the elevator. Thomas Sterling. He wore a charcoal gray suit with no tie, eyes sharp but tired. His assistant followed close behind, whispering, "That's all 5. Should I start with Harvard or Wharton?" Thomas glanced at the group. "Start with the guy whose resume uses the word synergy 3 times, he said flatly. That got a smile from his assistant. She turned to call over the first candidate. Inside the 28th floor conference room, the air was tight. Candidate number 1, Harvard grad, charming smile, launched into a 10-minute pitch about optimization, lean finance models, and digital transformation. Thomas nodded, asked 2 follow-up questions, then motioned to HR to end the session early. Candidate number 2 dropped buzzwords like grenades. Strategic liquidity enhancement. Aggressive capital agility. Thomas checked his watch halfway through. Candidate number 3 was nervous. Smart but young. Too young. When asked how he'd handle a liquidity crisis, he offered to put a pin in it and loop back after analysis. By the time candidate number 4 left the room, Thomas looked like he was reconsidering capitalism entirely. He took a sip of black coffee. Next. Back in the lobby, Vanessa closed her notebook just as the assistant approached. "Miss Cole?" Vanessa stood, smoothed her jacket and walked toward the elevator. One of the young men muttered, "Bold move, sending her in last." Another said, "She's probably here for the diversity checkbox." Vanessa didn't turn around. She didn't need to. She had numbers. And numbers never lied. The interview room was silent when she entered. No slide deck. No laptop. Just Vanessa, Thomas Sterling, and 2 HR reps with notepads. Thomas didn't stand. Just observed her as she took her seat across from him. "Miss Cole," he said. You came highly recommended from no one actually. You just showed up. I prefer to let my work speak for itself, she replied, even and confident. 20 years in finance? Yes. 3 turnaround cases in the past 6 years? 5, she corrected. Last company? Boulder North Logistics. They were 60 days from bankruptcy when I arrived. We sold at double valuation 12 months later. He paused. Where'd you study? Howard. Class of 2007. And what would you say your greatest weakness is? Vanessa gave a small smile. I don't entertain hypotheticals in emergency rooms. Thomas tilted his head. She wasn't playing the game. She was rewriting it. He leaned back. And why Sterling and Vale? Vanessa replied without blinking. Because you're bleeding money, your executive team is scared, and your brand is 3 weeks from becoming a cautionary tale. I don't need your salary. I need your books. And if you want to survive the quarter, you'll give them to me. A long silence filled the room. One of the HR reps shifted uncomfortably. Thomas looked at her, not the way the other candidates had looked at him, trying to impress. Not the way his board looked at him, full of doubt. Vanessa's eyes were level. Certain. After a beat, Thomas nodded once. Congratulations, he said. You're hired. Vanessa didn't blink. For half a second, the walls around her cracked. A flicker of shock, of hope, of finally, and then she tucked it away, nodded, and extended a hand. I'll need a full audit by close of business Friday, she said. Start with the last 3 quarters. And I want access to your line managers, not just the C-suite. Thomas smirked. Demanding already. I don't have time to be liked, she said. Just effective. Back in the lobby, chaos was already building on the trading floor 3 levels down. Phone calls with angry clients. Department heads blaming each other. A secretary crying at her desk. Vanessa stepped into the elevator, now officially part of the machine. As the doors closed, she could still hear the sound of ticking keyboards and nervous laughter. And as she ascended toward the war zone, she whispered to herself, let's get to work. Thomas Sterling leaned back in his chair, hands folded, gaze steady. So, he said, how many years of experience do you have? Vanessa Cole didn't flinch. 20. And where did you work before this? Most recently, Boulder North Logistics. Before that, Keller Capital Partners. I've also run independent contracts in corporate recovery since 2012. He flipped through her resume. You've never worked at a place like this. I've saved places like this, she replied. Come. Certain. A pause stretched between them. The HR reps kept writing, pens scratching the silence. Thomas closed the folder, leaned forward, elbows on the table. Congratulations, he said. You're hired. Just like that. No grand speech. No long-winded pitch. No callback round. Vanessa blinked. Pardon? I said you're hired. Starting Monday. We'll send a formal offer letter by close of day. She stared at him for half a second, caught between suspicion and stunned silence. Then her back straightened. Her lips twitched into the hint of a smile. Thank you, she said. Thomas nodded once. You'll report directly to me. We don't have time for a slow rollout. You'll be managing the fire while still learning the floor plan. I don't need a map, she replied. He almost smiled. Almost. As she stood, one of the HR reps added, we'll arrange ID badges, email access, and send it all to my personal inbox, Vanessa said, already gathering her bag. I'll be ready. She stepped into the hallway, heels clicking with quiet authority, heart pounding in her chest. She didn't let it show. But when she reached the lobby and the receptionist glanced up, Vanessa offered a polite nod, and then walked straight out into the New York sunlight. She stood outside the glass tower for a long moment, looking up at the monolith she'd just stepped into. She had the job. Not as a consultant. Not as a short-term bandage. As the finance manager of Sterling and Vale. For the first time in a long time, the door hadn't just cracked open. It had swung open and she'd walked through it. Her phone buzzed. From Rachel, assistant. Girl? You're glowing. How'd it go? Vanessa smiled down at the screen, thumbs tapping fast. To Rachel. Got it. Starting Monday. Full firestorm access. The following Monday, the company was already deep in freefall. The press had caught wind of internal layoffs. Rumors of fraud investigations began trending on Twitter. 2 major investors froze their assets. The Sterling and Vale building buzzed with frantic energy. Floor 17, trading, looked like a crime scene. Traders barked into phones. Sales heads paced in figure eights. An intern knocked over a latte and didn't stop to clean it. HR was fielding calls from angry employees being cut loose without warning. Legal was double-checking exit agreements. And at the top of it all, Thomas stood in his office, sleeves rolled up, phone pressed to his ear. "She starts today," he said. "Yes, I know." "No, I don't want board approval. I'm telling you. The bleeding stops now." He hung up just as Vanessa stepped through the door. Dressed in slate gray, sleeves rolled up, tablet in hand. "Ready." He motioned her in. "You still sure about this?" "More than ever." He handed her a key card. "You'll need this. And armor." By noon, Vanessa had already taken over the second-floor finance bullpen. She gathered the staff, 9 of them all jittery, and spoke clearly, concisely. "We're not chasing optimism," she said. "We're diagnosing the truth. I'll need the last 6 quarters of revenue, raw expenditures, and every irregularity flagged in red. No filters. No spin." A junior accountant raised a hand. "Aren't we supposed to route all findings through?" Vanessa cut him off. "Directly to me." Pause. Then another hand. "Who exactly are you reporting to?" "I report to the data," she said flat. "And if you want to keep your job, so do you." The room fell silent. Then someone, an older woman in the back, nodded. "Yes, ma'am." By 3 o'clock she was inside the finance archive, sleeves rolled, skimming endless printouts. The patterns were clear. Overspending. Ghost vendors. Incomplete audits from the previous year. She marked every page like a surgeon dissecting rot. She didn't even notice when Thomas stepped in behind her. "How bad is it?" he asked. Vanessa held up a thick red-marked packet. "Worse than your board knows. But not unfixable." He nodded, folding his arms. "You're not like the others." She didn't look up. "Good." At 7:10 p.m., Vanessa finally sat back in her borrowed office chair, pulled out her phone and sent a message. To Maya. "First day complete. Might be saving a dying beast. Want Chinese for dinner?" From Maya. "Yes. You're a boss. Get orange chicken, please." Vanessa chuckled. Outside her glass wall, a finance bro glanced sideways at her, then looked away when she caught him staring. She knew what they saw. A black woman who didn't shrink. She didn't care what they thought. She had the numbers. And numbers didn't care about your comfort zone. By nightfall, she was the only one still in the bullpen. Somewhere on the lower floors, a printer jammed. A phone rang and rang with no one to answer. And up on the 30th floor, Thomas Sterling stared at the first daily report she'd sent him. 10 pages. Precise. Ruthless. Brilliant. At the bottom was a line in bold. "Tomorrow we stop the bleeding. Next week we start the climb." Vanessa Cole arrived at the office at 6:45 a.m. She liked to be early, not for appearances but for clarity. The quiet hours before the building woke up were when the truth showed itself. Systems moved slower. Paper trails didn't hide as easily. She keyed into the executive floor, past 2 janitors who nodded respectfully, and entered her corner office, still bare, still temporary. Her first week had been war by email. She'd paused 3 active contracts, frozen a burn rate line item, and uncovered a redundancy where 2 departments were paying 2 vendors for the same service. Nobody thanked her. But someone CC'd the board to question her aggressive tone. She made a note of it. Vanessa didn't do fragile egos. At 8:30 a.m., she walked into the finance team's bullpen with 3 new policies printed on clean white paper. She handed them out herself, 1 desk at a time. Policy 1. All financial reports must now go through a unified template. No more interpretive formatting. Policy 2. Cross-department expenses must be reviewed bi-weekly with a compliance officer. Policy 3. Internal audit prep begins next week. No exceptions. The junior staff stared. A few nodded stiffly. One man crumpled his copy as soon as she turned her back. At 8:43 she was back in her office. By 9 o'clock the whispers began. Down in operations, a manager named Derek Bloom made a show of bumping into her in the hallway. "Hey, new policy boss lady," he said, grinning like they were old friends. "Heard you've got us all on financial lockdown." Vanessa looked up from her tablet. "Just enforcing accountability." He chuckled. Sure. Just don't go all scandal on us. She paused. Come again? You know, take over the room vibes. Olivia Pope meets Wall Street. She gave him a look flat enough to shatter glass. That's supposed to be a compliment? His grin faded slightly. Hey, I'm just saying you're making waves. I'm here to fix the boat, she said. Waves are part of the job. At noon she met with procurement. The room was all suits and suspicion. One man, white 40-something with a bad comb-over and worse posture, interrupted her 5 minutes in. Look, I get it, he said. You want to streamline. Everyone wants to be the hero. But this isn't a charity rescue, okay? This is a real company. Vanessa blinked once. A real company currently bleeding $4.2 million a quarter. He didn't like that. Another exec leaned forward. You'll find people here have been doing things a certain way for a long time. Vanessa met his eyes. And that way led you here, to me. That night, Thomas called her into his office. She stepped in, file in hand, already anticipating resistance. Got a minute? He asked. Barely. He smirked. You're making friends. That was never part of the job description. Thomas set down his tablet. You're not wrong. But some people are pushing back. Saying your style is combative. Would they say that if I looked like you? He didn't answer right away. Vanessa continued, voice calm. I've heard the whispers. Diversity hire. Intimidating. Knows too much. He sighed. I hired you for your mind. And the rest of me came with it, she said. If that's a problem for your people, maybe they need new people. Thomas didn't argue. Instead, he looked at the sheet she handed him. Revenue leakage in 3 departments, she said. We patched this, we buy ourselves 2 quarters. Maybe more. He nodded. Approved. The next morning, Vanessa arrived to find someone had moved her office chair. Not taken. Not missing. Just moved. Turned slightly, pushed back an inch off center. Subtle. Pointed. She sat, adjusted it silently, and began her day. Later that week, she was invited, last minute, to a department head meeting. She wasn't on the calendar. Everyone else had a printed agenda. She didn't. She listened for 30 minutes as a marketing exec talked about brand perception. She waited while a young tech VP suggested a flashy new app no one needed. Finally, Thomas glanced her way. Vanessa? Thoughts? She stood, paperless, and spoke clearly. None of this matters if we run out of cash. We've got 4 months. The brand won't survive a liquidity scandal. Nor will your app. The room fell still. Then the older woman from HR, the only other person of color in the room, gave her the smallest, most imperceptible nod. Vanessa sat down. That evening she left the office late. On her way to the elevator, she passed a group of younger employees chatting near the vending machines. They went quiet as she approached. One of them, a 20-something in loafers and fake confidence, muttered just loud enough to hear. Wonder how long she'll last. Vanessa paused. Turned. Long enough, she said. They went quiet. The elevator dinged. She stepped inside and didn't look back. At home, Maya was asleep on the couch, laptop still open on a geometry worksheet. Vanessa draped a blanket over her, took a breath, and sat beside her with a tea she didn't even sip. She opened her email and found another anonymous message forwarded from HR. Subject, just saying. Hope you're not expecting to run things too long. This place isn't built for people like you. Vanessa stared at it. Then she deleted it. She opened her financial dashboard instead. The chart showed a faint upward curve. Just a whisper. But it was real. The quarterly report hit Thomas Sterling's desk at 7:03 a.m. sharp. 12 pages. That's unforgiving. Exactly how Vanessa Cole liked it. He skimmed the first line and froze. Net operational losses, down 37%. He kept reading. Dead contracts, canceled. Duplicate vendors, eliminated. Emergency credit lines, untouched. And most importantly, investor churn, 0. He leaned back in his chair, the faintest smile threatening his usual scowl. Vanessa had said she needed 3 weeks. She'd done it in 2.5. Across the floor, buzz rippled in quiet waves. The numbers weren't just up, they were climbing. People started noticing. Not publicly, of course. No one said, Vanessa, out loud in the break room yet. But her name moved like current through whispered conversations and backchannel threads. Have you seen the latest? Yeah, we might survive this quarter. She actually fixed the S13 mess. Someone even added her initials, VC, to the whiteboard of firefighters in the compliance room. No one erased it. That was the thing about results. You didn't have to beg people to respect them. They just did. Vanessa didn't slow down. Her office looked like a war room. Charts taped to walls. Notes pinned on corkboards. Financial forensics scrawled in her sharp, precise handwriting. At 2 p.m., she walked into Thomas's office unannounced. You've got two major investors watching us closely, she said. One is testing our long-term plan. The other is looking for an excuse to pull. Thomas glanced up. Which one flinches first? Neither, if we give them a reason to believe. He motioned for her to sit. I have the board in my ear again. They want reassurance. Vanessa handed him a folder. Tell them we've entered recovery phase. No sugarcoating. Just raw truth and upside. Thomas flipped it open. You're pushing a new capital structure. I'm pushing survival. He didn't argue. That night, news broke. Sterling and Vail shows signs of recovery amid aggressive restructuring, says analyst. The article was brief but powerful. Vanessa's name wasn't mentioned, but she saw it for what it was, the first crack of light. The next morning, Thomas was stopped in the elevator by board member Alex Wexler, silver-haired and power-tanned. I don't know who this woman is, Wexler said, but she's doing something. Thomas shrugged. That's why I hired her. Wexler raised an eyebrow. Yeah, well, let's hope she knows her place. Thomas stared at him dead-eyed. She knows everyone's place. That's why she's here. Vanessa kept her head down, eyes on the work. She didn't chase praise. She didn't accept passive-aggressive notes slid into her inbox. And she didn't stop asking questions that made department heads sweat. In one meeting, she interrupted a sales VP mid-presentation. You're projecting 18% growth next quarter, she said. Based on what? The same clients who ghosted you last quarter. He sputtered. We're rebuilding relationships. We don't build forecasts on feelings, she snapped. Thomas didn't say a word, but he was smiling inside. Midweek, Vanessa met with the internal audit team. They walked in tense, walked out shaken. She caught every gap, flagged every inconsistency, built a plan to turn chaos into compliance. One manager muttered, "She's not human." Vanessa overheard it. She didn't react. But later, in the elevator, she smiled to herself. Good. Let them be scared. Fear paid attention. That Friday, something unexpected happened. Her name showed up in a company-wide memo. Thanks to recent financial leadership, Sterling and Vail has stabilized its short-term risk profile. Special recognition to finance manager Vanessa Cole for her diligence during this critical phase. Short, dry. But it was the first public acknowledgement. She didn't need applause. But truth had its own gravity. The next day, someone left a coffee on her desk. No note. Just her order, strong, no cream, 2 sugars. Vanessa picked it up, took a sip, and got back to work. That night, Thomas called her into his office. Stock's up 7 points since Monday, he said. Vanessa nodded. It won't last unless we move fast. He tossed her a pen. Then let's move. She caught it without flinching. He studied her for a moment. You've changed the air in here. Some people still can't breathe, she replied. He didn't deny it. She stood. Let me know when you're ready for phase 2. And that is. We stop surviving, she said, and start dominating. Back at home, Maya sat on the couch with a tub of popcorn, watching an old superhero movie. Vanessa dropped her bag on the table and collapsed beside her. Rough day? Maya asked. No. Good one. You saved them, didn't you? Not yet. Maya looked up at her aunt, smiling. You will. Vanessa smiled back. She'd come into Sterling and Vail with a sword. Now she had something even more powerful. Momentum. It started with a whisper. Someone in legal forwarded Vanessa an email thread. Subject, potential liability, former compliance issue? Attached was a decade-old article, barely 2 paragraphs long, about an internal reporting discrepancy from Vanessa's time at Keller Capital Partners. No charges. No follow-up. No wrongdoing. Just smoke from a fire that had never existed. But in a company full of wolves, smoke was enough to get blood in the air. Thomas found the folder on his desk 3 hours later. He didn't need to ask who dug it up. The signs pointed to Brent Lassiter, a senior VP of strategic partnerships. Slick, calculating, and increasingly vocal about his discomfort with new leadership disrupting the culture. Thomas walked into the executive lounge where Brent was holding court with 2 other suits. "Got a minute?" Thomas asked flatly. Brent stood. "Always." They stepped into the hallway. "Digging up old dirt now?" Thomas said, not even pretending to be polite. Brent shrugged. "Just doing my due diligence. The board will want to know if she's a risk." "She's the reason we're not bankrupt," Thomas snapped. "Still, that kind of reputation stain could scare investors." Thomas took a slow breath. "You know what scares investors more than a dated blog post?" Brent smirked. "A quarterly loss. Which you haven't helped me avoid." "Vanessa has." He turned to leave, then paused. "And Brent? Keep pushing this and I'll have your background scrubbed next." That night, Thomas called Vanessa into his office. She entered calm as always, but her eyes flickered when she saw the folder on his desk. He slid it over without a word. She opened it. "Read." "I know this story," she said. "I figured you did." "It wasn't a violation," she said evenly. "The CFO buried a compliance report. I flagged it. Internal review cleared it. They never apologized." Thomas leaned back, watching her. "And now it's resurfacing," she continued. "Because I'm not supposed to be here." He nodded. "Someone's scared." She tapped the edge of the folder. "They should be." A beat passed. Then Thomas said, "I stand by you." She looked up, surprised not by the support but by the way he said it. Blunt. Without hesitation. "That's rare," she said quietly. He shrugged. "So is competence." The next morning, a company-wide, anonymous feedback platform lit up. "She's too aggressive. She's making people uncomfortable. I don't feel heard under her leadership." All unsigned. All within 48 hours of the Brent incident. But under that noise, something else was happening too. People were adapting. The finance team had stopped resisting her new structure. Compliance was hitting deadlines. One of the interns from marketing started quietly following her on LinkedIn. And then came the quarterly stock report. Sterling and Vail was up another 12%. Investors began calling, not to complain but to ask how soon they could reinvest. Thomas and Vanessa met late Friday in a closed-door session with 3 board members. Wexler was one of them. Still skeptical. "She's a lightning rod," he said. "You're gambling on someone volatile." Thomas stayed calm. "She's not volatile. She's accurate. There's a difference." Still, the article was nothing, Vanessa said, cutting in. "And if it was something, we'd be having this meeting in a courtroom, not a boardroom." Wexler bristled. "I don't appreciate the tone." Vanessa leaned forward. "I'm not here for appreciation. I'm here to fix what you broke." Dead silence. The other 2 board members didn't speak, but they didn't object either. When the meeting ended, Thomas walked her to the elevator. "That was bold," he said. "Bold built this building," she replied. "I'm just making sure it doesn't collapse." That night, alone in her apartment, Vanessa opened an email from Maya's school. The girl had been nominated for the advanced math track. Her GPA was soaring. Vanessa stared at the screen, exhausted but proud. She typed back, "Thank you for recognizing her. She works harder than anyone I know." Then she stared at her own reflection in the dark window. The world never gave women like her room to breathe. So she carved space with data, with fire, with steel. Let them keep whispering. She was building something they couldn't dismantle. 3 months later, Sterling and Vail was not just surviving. It was thriving. Revenue had stabilized. Operational costs were down 42%. 2 major investors who had previously pulled out quietly bought back in. One even requested a meeting, not with Thomas Sterling but with Vanessa Cole. And for the first time in a long time, the company's name hit the press without the word trouble beside it. Sterling and Vail's quiet rebuild. Meet the woman behind the numbers. Wall Street now. Vanessa didn't grant interviews. She didn't need to. The work spoke. So did the board. On a Tuesday morning in October, they held an official vote behind closed doors. The result was unanimous. At 9:45 a.m., Thomas knocked on Vanessa's office door. "Got a minute?" She looked up from her laptop. "Always." He handed her a single piece of paper. A formal offer. New title. New salary. New territory. Chief Financial Officer. Vanessa read it once. Then looked up. You sure about this? I'm not doing it as a favor, Thomas said. I'm doing it because we don't make it without you. And now I want everyone to know it. She studied his face. No smirk. No performance. Just clarity. Vanessa leaned back, nodded once, and signed her name at the bottom. The news hit the internal system before lunch. Some employees cheered quietly. Others said nothing. Brent Lassiter packed up his office without a word and was walked out the same day. HR offered him a soft exit. He declined. No one stopped him in the lobby. Vanessa watched it from her glass wall, expression unreadable. Thomas stepped in. One less problem. He was never the problem, she replied. He nodded. But he was the last of them. Later that week, Vanessa called a full finance department meeting. She stood at the head of the table, her table now, and looked around at the people who had once refused to meet her eyes. You've survived a war, she told them. That makes you dangerous in a good way. But don't mistake progress for comfort. We're not done. She paused, then added, You're part of a turnaround. That means you're part of history. Build like it matters. Then she left them to digest it. She received her new access badge that afternoon. It had a silver trim and a single word beneath her name, CFO. She slipped it into her wallet without ceremony. She didn't need the symbol. She'd earned the seat. Outside the company, the whispers changed. VC now meant very capable. Investors referenced her by first name. Former colleagues reached out just to reconnect. Even one of her doubters from Keller Capital sent a long-winded apology email. She didn't answer it. Instead, she responded to one from a young black woman at a small financial firm in Brooklyn. Miss Cole, I saw your story. I didn't know women like us could make it in spaces like that. Thank you. Vanessa wrote back. We always could. They just didn't expect us to. Your turn next. At home, Maya hugged her at the door. You're the boss now, right? She asked. Vanessa smiled. Technically, yes. So you run everything? Not everything, Vanessa replied. But the part that matters? Yes. Maya nodded, satisfied. I told the kids at school my aunt is richer than their parents, she added proudly. Vanessa laughed. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. But it's true. Still. Humble bragging only, please. They ordered takeout and watched a movie in pajamas. No glass towers. No stock tickers. Just peace. The next morning, Vanessa walked into the Sterling and Vale lobby like she had the first time, poised, focused, silent. Only this time people stood. A security guard nodded. The receptionist smiled. One of the analysts from her floor actually rose when she passed, reflexively. She didn't need applause. But respect earned by fire had its own rhythm, its own weight. She stepped into the elevator alone. The doors closed. And for the first time in years, maybe in her whole life, Vanessa Cole allowed herself to feel it fully. Power. Not gifted. Not borrowed. Claimed. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video.